Welcome, everybody. If you ever wondered what it's like to have a podcast, what you typically do is you run the intro and then you awkwardly stare at each other in the Zoom call, waiting for the intro to end. And then you can actually introduce your guest, who is got it again. Yes. That's like 2 episodes in a row. I've gotten a snort in the first 5 seconds. I'm so happy about this.
Well, because I can't hear the intro. I don't know when
it's great. It's great. That's why I have to be. If you ever wonder why Rev is the first one talking every episode, I'm also the acting producer because budget constraints. 2, awesome. So we've got a special guest with us today. She is TV writer. She is comic book writer. She is literally one of the nicest people you will ever meet. And I'm not just saying that because she's a guest. Literally, it's annoyingly wholesome person. Just a very, very good person. It is Miss Shawna Benson, who has written for 100, Star Trek Prodigy, which is coming out, He-Man. Yes. You did the Green Arrow comic. So to say that you've got a pretty full IMDb page is a factual statement.
Yes, it could be fuller because I still can't get verified on Twitter because I don't have enough.
I got verified before you.
What?
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense though. Like, how do I get verified before you? That makes absolutely no sense.
Some very arbitrary rules. That's all I know. But I'm hopeful that.
But if you go write a blog spot for if you go with SB Nation and write like 2 articles about the Seattle Seahawks, we can get you a check mark like that.
I used to have a blog. I had a blog for years, almost 15 years. And then I finally gave it up because I was writing for a living, and then suddenly writing on my own time felt like a waste. It's like, I'm not getting paid to do this. I should probably stop. So no, and I don't even tweet that much anymore. Same reason.
Maybe I'll get verified. I think I have 1 follower on Twitter so far.
And it's me.
Well, hang on. I didn't know you were on Twitter. If I'd known that, I would have already followed you, Bobae.
Yeah, we got to get her. She's in the same way that I've got to use TikTok more. She's got to use Twitter more. She never uses. You use TikTok? Oh, not much of a TikTok.
I barely use Instagram. And it's, when I remember that I might actually have something worth posting on Instagram, I post on Instagram. But I was a Twitter early adopter, and people thought I was a lunatic. They thought that it was maybe going to last 3 months. And what was I doing? Which is how I was able to get my own name basically as my handle because.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. I basically, when it started, I created 2 handles, one of which is been locked. It's and is no longer in use because I was my primary handle until we became professional writers, and then it sort of made sense to switch over to my actual name and stop using the thing that wasn't actually my name. So, but that's my story on that. Super exciting, I know.
I mean, it's content, everybody. It's what you pay.
Hopefully, the other stories I have are a lot more interesting.
Well, I mean, you take them as you look. 26 episode seasons, 13 of them are going to be okay. 5 are going to be amazing.
I would kill to write on a 26 episode a season show. I would kill for that.
Well, if you can find a time machine back to 1995, you can do it. Nobody does that anymore.
No, they do not. I can tell you that. Except CBS. If you can get a gig on a CBS show, it's very lucrative.
Fair. Speaking of CBS shows, speaking of CBS shows, weird mix, especially with how it started as CBS/Nickelodeon, and then it's kind of just been Paramount Plus, and then eventually Nickelodeon again, but you worked at Nickelodeon. Star Trek Prodigy. Star Trek Day. So the day we're recording this is not the day you're listening to this because time is a thing. But we were recording this on the 9th, the day after Star Trek Day. Shout out 55th anniversary to Star Trek. The 2nd longest running sci-fi show of all time. Stupid Doctor Who. Stupid. You just stop running for. Thank you, please. Can I have nothing? America's supposed to jinx it.
Don't jinx it.
I'm just messing with Bo. She literally has a TARDIS above her head. So
I know.
It's
Anyways, sorry.
Mine's in my office. Otherwise, I'd pull it out for you.
You have a TARDIS?
I just have a Funko one. Sorry, it's not a huge one.
That's awesome. That's pretty cool.
I have a sonic screwdriver. So
I
No, you do not.
have 11s.
first of all, I want
Me
to pause
too.
the show because I want to prove you wrong. But my friends who got married were the husband was a huge Star Trek nerd, and the wife a huge Doctor Who fan. So it's the bouquet. The bouquet is the sonic screwdriver, and the stem is a sonic screwdriver, and the bouquet is actually old Star Trek novels turned into paper flowers.
That's
as the
amazing.
bouquet.
That's
So-
wonderful.
So it was a brilliant idea. It's absolutely fantastic. But that is the only sonic screwdriver
That's
I own.
adorable.
And it's also the reason that you never see it on any of my like nerd stuff is because I don't want to take it apart from the bouquet, obviously. So
No.
That makes
Yeah.
sense. That makes sense.
Did you
Oh my
catch
God,
the
that's
bouquet?
So cute.
Did you-
Is that how you got that? Did you go in? You're like, all the bridesmaids are there, and you're like, no, mine.
what can I
I can
say?
just see it.
Mine.
I've got a thing for nerdy collectibles. I mean, you do what you got to do. You do what you got to do. But
Oh,
I could see Rev just like body checking a bridesmaid to get to that.
it's mine.
I'm very serious about my nerd stuff. I know I'm always operating in front of a green screen, but I literally have so much nerd crap that it sits in storage because I have too much. Like I have a box of Funko Pops. I'm like, please, anybody want to buy these? Like $2 a pop. Like I love them, but I have no place to put them anymore.
Oh, $2 a pop.
Yeah, you got what I did there. Yeah, so
True story. My parents have they live in San Diego and I'm in Los Angeles, of course. And they have my
of course she's a
toy
writer.
chest. The basically the toy chest that I had when I was like 3. And it's basically like 2 shelves, and then it's got these chalkboard doors that slide across for like the drawers where the toys would go. And I was basically like, I'm just going to take it back. And that's basically where I'm going to display all my toys in my office. It's so ridiculous, but
That
it's
is
like,
so-
and it's also only like 3 feet tall. So it's super short, but I'm like, I can put all my Funkos on there. It'll totally work. And it's my own toy chest. So
That is so cute. I
it will
love
be. I'm
that.
remodeling. So when I get around to getting it brought up here, it'll be really nice.
So when you were at Nickelodeon, because that's where
Yeah.
apparently y'all did Prodigy, what was like? Because you, like me, diehard grow up Star Trek fan. Like I've got a picture of me at like 1-year-old staring at the old boob tube TV with Star Trek on it. So this was obviously a bucket list item for you. What was it like to just get there? Were you like, yo, I'll do it for free. Just let me write.
Well, I would. I didn't tell them that because money is nice. Money helps.
Yeah.
I mean, it was twofold, right? Because I'd never worked in animation, one. And then to go to the Nickelodeon facility, to their campus, was super cool, just on its own merit. And I really nerded out over a lot of the design, like the canteen or the cafeteria. It's a Ren and Stimpy themed location, and so it was those sort of things, like those touches all over the place, was just really amazing. And then, they, like on day one, they asked us when we came in as, new employees of Nickelodeon, like, what was our favorite Nickelodeon show growing up? And of course, I am of a generation where I have to go, you can't do that on television because that's how old I am. And that's what was on Nickelodeon that I absolutely loved when I was a kid. But everyone else was like Rocko's Modern Life or Rugrats or, and I was just like, oh yeah, SpongeBob. I'm like, I'm so old. But then they showed us where our office was, and they had put us into what is essentially the original Nickelodeon building, right next door to the SpongeBob SquarePants offices. And their place, they've been in that same location since pretty much the beginning of the show. So they're kind of ensconced there, and they have like fan letters on the walls, like they have and like with drawings from kids, and it's all themed. And they have like a mural. They have like a huge mural. I mean, it's so cool. And then, in the center of the area where all the offices kind of surround it, including the conference room, there's basically a place for them to sit and play video games and a tiki bar. And we were invited over for a mixer once after hours where and they had catered it. So they like got catering, they like brought in food and we like all just hung out and chatted and swapped stories and whatever. But yeah, so I mean, getting to kind of, learn all of that. And then you get to like start talking about Star Trek and get paid for it. And that's the best. That's the best thing.
That is so cool.
Relatable, except for the writing part. But kind of.
Then the writing part happens. But yeah, I mean, it is
because in an off way, I mean, I'm definitely not a writer, but since my primary game has been Star Trek Fleet Command, it is kind of cool that something that I've grown up with loving does pay my bills, like in an off way. I mean, CBS is not handing me a paycheck. That'd be great, CBS, if you're listening. I am very entertaining to some people. If you're looking for small niche demographic capturing and capability, this ginger's got you. But yeah, Star Trek is amazing. And by the way, any SpongeBob Star Trek crossover happening?
Oh man, that would have been sweet, now I think about it. But alas, I think that's probably got to be something that happens down the road. But yeah, originally the show is a Nickelodeon Studios production in conjunction with CBS and Paramount. And then when the merger happened, when Viacom, Paramount and CBS came back together, and that happened while we were working on the show, we all wondered, like, well, what does that mean for us? Like, because one of the things that you couldn't do until the merger kind of came about, or at least it became easier, was referencing the films. Yeah. Because the films all lived on Paramount side, and the TV licenses and everything to do with TV were on the CBS side. And now that it's all one, now you can get, like, on Star Trek Day, they're playing, the First Contact theme, right? You don't have to pretend the movies don't exist, or you have to like go, well, there are movies, but we can't show you anything. I mean, it just, now all of that is together, which, makes life a lot easier. It didn't surprise me when they announced that they were going to platform Prodigy on Paramount Plus first and then onto Nickelodeon, because, they can do it on a paid service. And then, I don't know, I have no idea when it will go to Nickelodeon, but then obviously that would be commercial TV.
Yeah. My thought would be they'd let the first season complete and then it would go to Nickelodeon. That's just from a logical thought process standpoint.
That makes sense. That's probably pretty close. But I mean, I'm sure we'll hear about it after the show has premiered at some point, which will be October 28th. We found out yesterday.
Yeah, October 28th. Oh. Excited. It's close. It's spooky season. So hope there's a Halloween themed episode. You got a Halloween themed episode? Kids love Halloween and candy.
I don't.
Maybe
I won't say. I will say there's one that I would consider to be kind of spooky.
Ooh, okay. There we go.
But that's about all as far as I'll go on that. But
darn,
yeah, the
NDAs and stuff.
I will say so Nickelodeon, one of the fun things they do is that at Halloween they create all of the different shows get a section of this one area of the building where they bring kids in for trick or treating, but they can go through these like hallways or rooms that you decorate for your show and you give it theming. So we did.
Oh, that's cool.
We did a hallway that was essentially like if you were passing a bunch of holodecks. And so you get a set of doors, and there'd be, something happening inside that you'd see like half the holodeck wall and then, like a beach scene or whatever. So it was like the ship, things are going wrong on the ship. And we had like the red alert. And so the lights were bright and they were red and flashing and, and then we had, we were all dressed up in uniforms and like helping these kids, guide these kids through it was fun. It was like one of the fun things we got to do while we were working on that show. And I had no idea that we would get to do something like that, where we got to like channel our creative energies, because all the other ones looked amazing because their artists were there. We were just writers. None of us can draw, like, really. I mean, it was like, ours is okay, but dang, man, you go over to like, even like Butterbean's hall or whatever, and they had like this really cute kind of cool thing with butterflies, and I felt a little inadequate for that.
It's okay. As long as the animation and the writing is great, we won't judge you for how your Halloween went.
I'm sure it looked super cute though.
Did you get
It
pictures?
was.
What's your favorite like I guess maybe generation of Star Trek outfit? Because
Already
I
know
know
this
there's
answer.
a lot of different series.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually an interesting question because you're right. Over the years, the uniforms have changed, and I actually really like the diversity of uniforms that you would see like in the DS9 Voyager era. But I have to default to what I knew, which was TNG was my first show, Next Generation. And when I was growing up, it was the one I was super in love with, even though I had seen the original series episodes prior to that. And I was super aware of that show and everything to do with it. TNG was my show. And
Yeah.
I was super like inspired by Gates McFadden. And I really love Dr. Crusher as a character. Like she is, she was like for a long time, I thought I would become a doctor because of her. I wanted to be like her. And my sister, God bless her, she made me a Starfleet uniform.
That is so sweet
for a birthday one year. So I got a Starfleet uniform that I would.
What color was it?
It's blue. So I mean, I
Blue?
was she basically made me a Dr. Crusher Starfleet, but it was the season 1-2 jumpsuit, right? Because that was
Yeah.
the easy pattern that they had at the time. And so, but I loved it. I wore it to a couple of cons. And it was a little large when she gave it to me, but I basically grew into it. It was like, because I think I was
so cute.
14 or 15 when she made it for me. And then, yeah. But so I like that one. I like it a lot.
That's awesome. Is blue your favorite color of uniform? I actually don't know. Are the different colors different rankings? I saw in one of the
Different
episodes that
roles.
Rev showed me. Oh, roles. Okay.
Yeah,
I
and
saw
the
somebody had a
original
collar.
series, yellow was the command color, and red was sort of the administrative, like it was like the engineering and some of the other
security.
roles,
Yeah.
secondary functions. Yes, security. Thank you.
I heard
That's
that
what red
red
shirts,
was the one that always dies. Is
That's
that
the red
true?
shirt, yeah.
Yeah.
But then and then TNG premiered, and they wanted to change the color scheme, and I think that the story about it is in the oral history of Star Trek. There's like this huge book that came out like during the 50th anniversary that told all these stories about all of the different shows, and I think the story in there of like why and how they changed the colors. But essentially from that time forward, from TNG forward, red has been the command color. Yellow is security and engineering.
If I remember right, they simply didn't like how Jonathan Frakes and Patrick Stewart looked in yellow compared to the red. It was more commanding for them to be in the red, and especially with Patrick Stewart. And if you're not familiar, had that Shakespearean background, a traditional actor. So he has a very commanding presence. And if you've ever watched TNG, the dude's range as an actor is very evident. My favorite, you remember the Sarek episode where he has to take on the emotions of Sarek? That level of acting you don't see on TV in terms of the emotional range.
Sure. Yeah.
It's very impressive. But yeah, it's your quick random history into the colors of Star Trek, which is phenomenal. And the reason they even went with the bright colors is because this is really showing how old Star Trek is. They went with bright colors because color TV was a new thing. So they wanted the brightest, poppiest colors on TV. So they went with, it was actually green, came off as yellow, and then blue and red. So the whole RGB thing.
And then, of course, they're not really primary colors when you get to the TNG era. They're slightly off. It's more like a maroon, teal, yellow, green, like chartreuse almost.
Now, in Prodigy, the only one we know of that actually has a uniform is going to be Janeway. And we've seen that in the preview. So Janeway's character, and obviously we can't go into too much detail here, but how much is Kate Mulgrew reprising her role important for like kids getting into Star Trek and Prodigy here? Like, is she kind of like, because all the main characters are essentially children, right?
Yeah, I mean, getting Kate Mulgrew attached to the show was huge, and using Janeway. I mean, Janeway was written into the original pilot, and it was definitely sort of that hope and a prayer that she would sign on to do it, and it was just the right choice, because not just because the show is set in the Delta Quadrant, which that's been said and announced, so I'm not spoiling anything there by saying that you're starting in the Delta Quadrant, but because she is a character, you know, as a female captain, you know, really the one that everybody knows from that time period, because again, they sort of have done this thing with Disco where Michael Burnham doesn't exist in the timeline, sort of, but that's neither here nor there either. But it was just like to bring that legacy character and have that be the person who is guiding these kids. It made the most sense. And so it was just really exciting when she was like, yes, I absolutely want to do this show, because it made our jobs that much easier. It was so easy. I won't say easy, but it was easier to write to her as the hologram, right, than if we had to just create an entirely new Starfleet character and make that the person that's guiding them. I mean, you know, the built-in sort of knowledge about Janeway helps, you know, especially certainly the average Trek fan who knows canon and knows the history of the show. It's familiar, right? It's an anchor point, because there's a lot of unfamiliar in this show, things that are going to be approached from a different point of view than what you have typically experienced them in the past, which is through a bunch of people wearing Starfleet uniforms and going into environments, even if they are strange new worlds, you know, they are still places that you're coming at it from a very distinct like point of view and protocols, right? And these kids don't have any of that. They got to learn it. They don't know what it is to be Starfleet or what that means to any, you know, they don't know Starfleet. They don't know Federation. They've never heard of it. Like, these are things that are just foreign concepts to these kids.
I remember watching the trailer, and one of my favorite parts, and obviously, once again, I always keep in mind it's for kids, and that's completely fine. But it was, you know, fire the phasers. There is no phaser button. We'll smash it all until there's a
pew 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 button.
Yeah, the pew pew button.
Pew, pew, pew.
You know, I'm really excited from that aspect of it, because one, you know, I get to have something that's actually focused to my children for them to grow up with, and that they can actually enjoy. But from an inspiration standpoint, how difficult is it to write for something that's completely brand new, that has to stand on its own, because it is for kids? So they're not going to go watch what I grew up with, or they're not going to go watch Measure of a Man,
Right.
amazing episode, and be like, oh, this is Star Trek. So how do you take that and then make something that's still Star Trek, but also completely unique, while also drawing in characters like Kate Mulgrews? And then you look at the ship. If you've seen the trailer, the ship is obviously very inspired by things like Prometheus. You know, how do you take and mix those in as a writer to where it's fresh, it's new, but it stands on its own while still being Star Trek?
Well, that is basically the $1 million question. It is very challenging. And I know that, you know, for some people it's like, well, TNG, I watched it when I was a kid. I watched it when I was 10 or 12 years old. Why do you need a show designed for kids when I, as a child, was able to watch TOS, or, you know, the original series, or TNG, or whatever? And, you know, the kind of basic answer is, this world, this series is 55 years old. The legacy of this show is massive. You know, we were saying before, I mean, there's almost 1,000 hours.
Well, that's like, and just, if you grew up watching TOS, guess what? That was probably the only thing on your TV that you had 6 channels you manually changed. Now there are like half a dozen pure cartoon, kid focus only things on TV. So like, if kids had to choose between the Next Generation or flashy, amazing colors through space cartoon, what do you think they're going to pick?
Right.
I mean,
and we talked about this. I mean, it makes it difficult to sort of know where to start. You know, do you start all the way at the beginning with the cage, or, you know, the man trap, and the original series? The cage was the original pilot, and then they ditched it, and then they went with the man trap as the first episode, and then they went back to the cage later in the series, you know, whatever. Like, do you start there? Or do you start at the beginning of the Next Generation? Or do you start at, you know, I mean, it becomes difficult to navigate. And then you end up with, well, now there's 7 seasons of this show, or there's, you know, 6 seasons of that show. And, you know, once you start looking at the numbers, it's very daunting for a new viewer, for somebody coming into it fresh. Hi, Bobae.
Yeah.
And so that was really one of the primary goals of the show. It wasn't just for kids, but for anybody who already knew Trek, because there's plenty there for you, but anybody who was new to Trek universe and didn't know a lot about it, but wanted an easier entry point. And this felt like a way to do that, to talk about what the Federation is, what Starfleet is, what they stand for, what they mean, and do it in a way that is, relatable for kids, certainly, but also for people who just aren't familiar with the world. Yeah, and then from there, hopefully you get inspired to go and watch some of these things where you have reference points like Voyager, to see Captain Captain Janeway when she's on the Voyager, and those episodes where she's doing that, where she is involved in that activity, or, you'll maybe catch a reference to a race like the Tellarites. And well, now I want to go watch episodes about Tellarites and other series, whatever it is, want to inspire that.
If that's ever been uttered by a Star Trek fan. I want to go find and watch episodes about Tellarites, but maybe I do have another one, like, because And for those who are listening now, the trailer for this is already out. So a lot of the references I'm making, y'all can go see for yourself. I promise I don't have some secret insider information or that I'm twisting Miss Shawna's arm. But we do see the Delta Quadrant Klingons, as they're so affectionately known from Voyager. We see Kazon. We see what I believe in the background looks like a little kitty Cation face, which, if true, will.
It looks like that little cat doctor from Doctor Who.
That too. And if it's true, this would mean every animated Star Trek that's ever come out has got a Cation, which I love, and it's a brilliant theme and should continue for all of the time, if I'm correct. But we see all of that. How do you take, because you're a Star Trek fan, most people consider Kazon to be a very disappointing part of Voyager.
Well, it's like how Ferengi were for TNG when it started.
You love the Ferengi whips. Those were amazing.
Oh, yeah.
So how do you take stuff like that and also see Trek, and you're making something new? How do you improve upon those characters who have got those kind of, people have built these paradigms where that's just an awful character, awful race. I don't want it. How do you take that and make it better? How do you make that character and that race better in this new show?
Well, I mean, you try your best to give your take of it, to put your spin on it. And in the case of this, it was, well, what is a visual way to represent that we are in the Delta Quadrant from pretty early in the show, like from the get-go. And, Kazon it was just kind of obvious in that way, like for the purposes of what the Kazon do and what we sort of have seen them doing in the past and what we needed, for story. They kind of fit the bill. I don't know that we really went down that path of how do we,
fix the Kazon.
redeem the Kazon. I don't think that was really a conscious thought, but I mean, it was very much about, well, what can we take that people already know and will immediately understand? Oh, it's a Kazon. If I've watched Voyager, I know that is a Delta Quadrant species or race. So this tells me that I'm in the Delta Quadrant. Like, I understand that as a concept, because it wouldn't be easy to tell otherwise. You could be anywhere in the galaxy. When you're starting from a place that is not immediately on a Starfleet ship, right?
And I feel like I'm talking a lot because I'm the Star Trek nerd of the group. But like for Bo, and Bobae, please feel free to chime in. When you're creating this show that comes out in October, so we're really only a month and a half away. What episode do you think, or is it just the entire series that, like, if you wanted, because me and Bo have sat down and started doing this, like I've been taking her, like, let's watch this episode and this Trek to get, those pinpoints. Because some people be like, well, if you're going to watch Trek, you got to watch all this, then all this, then all this, then catch this movie, then watch all this.
Yeah.
And I'm more of the type then, how about I'm gonna grab this episode that tells you kind of a theme of what we talk about, like in this season. I'm gonna give you this theme episode, and if you enjoy it, then I know you'll enjoy watching these 7 seasons. Cool. For Prodigy, for say a new person to the franchise like Bo, because she has watched the new movies, right, Bo? New movies,
yes,
and 3 episodes now from each different series.
I thought we did 2.
Oh, you've also watched Lower Decks episode 1 with me.
Oh, right.
Okay, so it was Voyager, Lower Decks, and TNG, right?
No,
Those are the 3
TOS, TNG, and Lower Decks.
Got it. Sorry.
So for Prodigy, how well is it going to be to like? How excited are you about being able to take somebody like Bo, completely brand new, and how confident are you that you're assimilating them into Trackdom now? Like Prodigy's going to do it.
Yeah, I feel pretty confident about it, honestly. I think that when trying to think of the way to say this that doesn't get me into any trouble, and yet because obviously there's a lot I can't say, but
Yeah.
I believe that someone who is not familiar with Star Trek will get pretty quickly into the show. And by quickly, I mean, you know, maybe like the first half of the season, right? That you become, you gain an understanding of what it's all about, right? Like, and I mean, I can tell you what it's about, right? That, you know, Star Trek is about discovering things. It's about exploration. It's about, you know, contacting other species and creating those, you know, overcoming differences and hope and, you know, aspirational goals, you know, things that we want to achieve as a human race. You know, those were all kind of things that play into Star Trek. But I think that you will actually feel those things over the course of the entire season. But certainly I think you get enough of it in the first like half of the season that you're starting from a good place. Let's put it that way. I think you're starting from a good place, and it will certainly open things up for the wider world.
So, Bo, do you have any like Star Trek specific questions, or are you just kind of like, I love all this?
Well, I did write down some questions.
I knew it.
I love it.
Well, but some of them we kind of already touched up on in a way that maybe you won't have like a direct answer, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I had like my first one, and I'm sorry for not knowing, is how many different series are there? Like,
So,
I mean, it's a legitimately good question. So
I believe we're up to 10 now.
10.
I think that's where we're at. I haven't done I'm guesstimating because we weren't given a number, right? Like you were our show number 9 or 10 or whatever. And there are shows behind us. Obviously, Strange New Worlds doesn't premiere for a while yet, or for a bit. I don't actually know their premiere date. And I don't know if it was announced either. I don't think it was. But you know, there are new things coming all the time. This is definitely the one thing that is significant is that this is the first time since the late 90s that you are going to have more than 2 shows airing simultaneously, or you have 2 shows, 2 Star Trek series airing simultaneously, because we are going to overlap with Discovery. Discovery premieres November 18th. That was announced yesterday as well. So there will be episodes of Prodigy still coming out.
Yeah.
And
did they announce Picard yet? I didn't look for Picard on Star Trek Day. I know it's sometime early next year.
I saw an article that mentioned it was like maybe February, March 2022. I don't know the date, though. I don't have that information. Yeah. One thing that you learn very quickly is that you do not have the keys to the kingdom of the Star Trek universe. Even if you work in the Star Trek universe, there's a lot you just don't know. And you go,
to answer Bo's question, I think this is, assuming Strange New Worlds does come out, which we know it will, but it's not actually out yet. That'll be 11, the 11th series. Wow. 3 animated series, 8 live action. And then, of course, there's been 13 movies with a 14th supposedly.
13 movies.
Yeah, so you've only seen the new 3. You've seen what are like the 3 Abrams movies. There's 10 entire movies between the original series cast and the TNG cast that we'll go over. Don't worry, we'll watch.
Right. Okay. That brings me to my second question, which Rev was talking about a little bit earlier. What order should I watch everything? Me personally being one of those people that is willing to go through like and see all of it, you know? Should I just
if you're willing to watch most of it or all of it, I mean, you can't go wrong kind of starting at the top. The challenge that you will have is that there's a lot of stuff at the beginning years, like the first 2 seasons of TNG are fraught with some episodes that are not good, like just flat out.
Except for Measure of a Man. Great.
That's correct. I mean, The Big Goodbye, I think,
Yeah, it's
and
also
Measure of a
good.
Man.
But you're right,
Even Contagion.
DS9's the same way. I feel like DS9 until Cisco loses his hair and Worf comes aboard is very meh. Then when that happens, it's arguably the best Trek I've ever seen.
When you say meh, are we talking about like the storyline content or like the way that they're acting or special effects? Because like I can watch classic Who and enjoy that. You know what I mean? So
if you can watch classic Who and enjoy it, then you are probably better primed to go through a lot of the historical stuff, like to go through the original series and the animated series. You know, there's a lot of debate about whether the original animated series is canon or not. I think it's a lot closer to canon than I think Gene even thought, to be honest. I mean, a lot of things have now been sort of retroactively made canon simply by bringing it into the larger Star Trek universe. So, you know, the fact that Cations exist outside of the original Star Trek animated series and in Lower Decks, you know, that made the Cations canon. But there was a long time where people weren't sure that they were really a canon species. And I mean, that's getting into some serious nerd stuff. But, you know, part of it, the challenge you run into is that, you know, the way that pacing of story, the way that story is told is so different now versus how it was done 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago. And, you know, for a lot of people, the stuff that was done 50 years ago feels slow and ponderous, not very exciting, a little too heady. And there are a lot of complaints about TNG that way in some of the early episodes as well. But it's, you know, it's going to definitely be a little more to what your tastes are to that degree.
Okay.
You know, I you know, for people who think that Prodigy looks maybe too action packed, because, you know, the trailer is very action packed. I think it has the right amount of action. You know, it's a half-hour show. You know, I mean, it's within that construct. It's not an hour long. So, you know, like Lower Decks, you're telling a lot of story in a short amount of time. And so things move at a different pace, just by that nature. But we also, as a society, have gotten very accustomed to watching TV shows that pack a lot into small amounts of time. Did that on The 100 all the time. Like that was a show that just chewed up story and spit it out. And like we were always like things that we thought we would do in like episode 10 of the season ended up happening in episode 7 because the plot would just keep moving back because we kept going through so much of it and it would go so fast. So I think it's just a different pacing. And kids can totally adjust to that. Just like the way, you know, 2-year-olds can use iPads, and I still have trouble figuring out like how to install apps sometimes, you know, I mean, like I mean, it's just a different way of consuming that content. I mean, Twitch wasn't a thing a few years ago. Like, who thought someone would sit for hours and watch someone play video games? Not me. I didn't know I'd be doing that now, but I do.
And we thank you. We thank you. For those wondering how I randomly meet famous TV writers and stuff, gaming, video games. It's and
that's the beauty of the internet, man. I mean, I mean, like when I was a kid and I was a TNG fan, the internet wasn't very widely accessible. So I had no way of finding other people who liked watching Star Trek than to hopefully find 1 or 2 people in my school. I mean, my best friend and I would watch it together. And then we found like, and same with Doctor Who even more so. Like I was such a nerd for liking this show from Britain that, you know, and we were watching it, you know, what, like 5 years behind or something, or 10 years behind. And, but to find like those kindred spirits in the local area, you know, that was the best I could do. I did actually have pen pals, like, you know, in fanzines, you could put an ad in and say, I'm looking for a pen pal. And I had pen pals. I had one like in California, and I had a pen pal in Virginia. And the pen pal I had in Virginia, she and I like wrote a Doctor Who. I mean, it was fan fiction. We didn't know wasn't called that. It wasn't called fanfic at that point, but we wrote our own story.
Do you still have that?
Oh yeah. And we would swap the pages back and forth. So I would write my pages and I'd send them to her, and then she'd write her pages and send them to me. And it was
wants your pages.
it was fun. I wrote and way before Big Finish or any of that stuff, we wrote a Sylvester McCoy episode where he picks up a new companion, and she was a secret Time Lord, and he was working with UNIT. So we had Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart, and we had Sergeant Benton. He was in it. And it was a lot of fun. Like, we just had fun writing that stuff, right? Like, you talk about,
that sounds like so much fun.
Pure fan fiction. And we didn't know what each one was going to write. Like, she would send me her pages. And of course, this was the US mail, not email. So I would send my pages off, and like a week, 2 weeks later, I'd get her pages back. I'd read her pages, and then I'd write my pages and send them back to her. And it wasn't until I got probably like halfway through this process, I went, I keep sending her my pages and I don't have them. So I only have half the story, and she only has half the story, because we keep sending each other our pages. So we only each have half the story. And I was like, well, this is not going to work. So I finally started photocopying my pages, but it took me like weeks to figure that out because they were handwritten. I didn't type them. I was handwriting them. But anyway,
you have handwritten Doctor Who content that you made.
But now you can go on Reddit and find people that are your tribe. You can go on blogs, you can go on Tumblr, you can go on Twitter, anywhere, and you can find the people that like what you like. And that's what's so amazing, that there is something literally out there for every person to love, and more than one person to love. And you can find each other. And to me, it's very sweet.
Yeah.
You don't have to put ads in the back of fanzines to find friends.
Bo, do you have anything else on your pad?
Yeah. Oh gosh, right. Oh my gosh. Okay, so there are about maybe 11 different series. Which one's your favorite series overall?
Prodigy.
Okay, no, that's fair.
The one she wrote.
That was my bad.
No. But to be fair though, I haven't seen it yet, and I've only heard bits and pieces. And everything I know and I have seen is amazing and fantastic, and it is almost entirely what everyone else has seen and heard. But it really is something I'm very proud of, and will be telling stories about until I'm 98 years old, and maybe somebody will be replacing my body parts for me or something, but and I can continue living. I'll dine out on it forever. But I
vote you first in line for that.
Yeah, I didn't know that I would get to write Star Trek, right? Like it was a hope and a wish and a dream when I got into this business. Like there were literally two things I wanted to write as a kid: Doctor Who and Star Trek. And they won't hire Americans to write Doctor Who unless you're writing Big Finish. If you're writing the radio dramas, I know a couple of Americans who have written radio dramas, but they will not hire Americans to write Doctor Who. You have to be British. You have to live in the UK. It's a whole thing. They're very proud of it being a British television series. And I totally get it. I understand. But I was an Anglophile since the age of 10, man. Like I know British history in some ways better than I know our own history. Like there were things about, I was watching Whose Line Is It Anyway when it was airing in the 90s and was being brought in on by Comedy Channel, which was the predecessor to Comedy Central. Like I steeped in Masterpiece Theater and mystery PBS shows that would show all the great costume dramas of the time period. But honestly, yeah, my first show was TNG. So Next Generation is always going to be the one that it's my comfort food. It's the one that I can watch an episode at any time. And, I'm enough of a fan that I hear the star date. I know exactly what season I'm in. I know where I'm at in the season approximately, and I can probably peg the episode within a minute and a half. But that's because I'm a nerd and I've watched most of those episodes a billion trillion times. So they all start on a star field and a star date, and you go, okay, give me 2 seconds. That's the star date. Okay, now I know that we're watching Galaxy's Child. Cool. So it's like it's like the Child, or you're watching one of the other ones, whatever. But yeah. So, but I love all of them. All of them are Star Trek. Discovery is Star Trek. Picard is Star Trek.
like even like people tell me all the time because I'm real big of it. Like I dislike Voyager. Not that I dislike the cast. I love the actors and everything. I do this a lot of the storylines. Voyager is not my favorite. I still watch Voyager happily. Sit down. I mean, I love all Star Trek. So.
There's no one who's ever like tried to write Star Trek that didn't want to write Star Trek. You know, if somebody says it's not Star Trek, it's maybe not the Star Trek you expect. But I guarantee you that they went into writing it wanting it to be a part of the larger world. And it may be from a different perspective. It may be a little bit different time period. You know, the types of characters you get are different. You know, it's more expansive. You know, we actually are much more in keeping with the tenets of IDIC, which is, you know, infinite diversity and infinite combinations, right? Like that is way more what it represented in present day Star Trek than was represented even in the 60s when that was spoken out loud as, you know, kind of a cool tenet or an idea, you know, that we are all of the same infinite, but we are infinite combinations of us. And we're all unique and special, but also all the same.
Bo, anything else? I'm trying to make sure you don't forget your list.
So I'm just in awe right now. I think my last question was, who's your favorite Star Trek character? And is that person who you cosplayed as or had that costume made for?
Yeah. Well, Dr. Crusher was absolutely like my role model, my heroine when I was growing up. And I mean that in the OINE sense, not in the drug sense. Like she was just the one that I connected to and I felt, and I'm not a natural redhead, but it was funny because my sister tweeted about it last night. I saw Gates McFadden on the Star Trek day and I was like, gosh, she's so great. And I was even like, she's like my mom. Sorry, mom. But I mean, she's kind of like my second mom. And she looks so fantastic. And I was like, I can't ever meet her because if I meet her, I will make an absolute fool of myself. Like just ridiculous, blubbering idiot, you know, going,
oh, I can relate to that.
And, you know, and my sister thought that was really funny. And so she tweeted it. And of course, in the course of us talking about it, I was like, you know, maybe that's why I dye my hair red all the time. It's because I really did really absorb her as my role model. And so I have kind of been doing that for a long time where I like having red hair, but it's mostly because of her. But I mean, the number of characters I can call out and, you know, oh God, so many. Lieutenant Barclay is one of my favorite characters. You know, Guinan is one of my favorite. Guinan is one of my favorite characters. You know, Jean's wife, Majel, played Nurse Chapel, and now we're gonna have a new Nurse Chapel and Strange New Worlds. And I'm like, this is so cool. Like, I'm just so excited about that opportunity that show has to sort of reinvent or fully flesh out some of these characters that didn't get enough screen time in the 60s in the original series, you know? It's gonna be fun.
Besides,
so cool.
Besides Prodigy, I know you've obviously TVs, but how fun is it to write comics?
Comics are ridiculous. I mean, honestly, comics was very helpful in learning to write animation, right? Because I had been writing in live action, and in live action, it's like the train never stops moving. And once the train leaves the station and you are writing a show and you're going to go into production, you are on that train. It does not stop. And so you are writing and then something is shooting and then something else is in post-production and it's just going and going and going until you get to the end of the season. And then you're still in post-production after you're done filming everything. And then maybe you get a break and then you start all over again. Animation, we had no idea what the characters look like. We didn't know what the music would be. We didn't know what our environments would be. We could describe them, but we weren't going to see them or, you know, stand on a set and watch those things happen. And, you know, for months and months and months after we finished writing. And it's a little bit like comics in that way, right? Because we sit down to write a comic and, you know, we would write the script. The script would go to our editors. They'd give us notes. We'd do another round. Then they would send it to the artist. And the artist would start drawing the comic. And, we would call out what the panels were, right? Like in a comic script, you'd say, panel 1, this is going to be a 6-panel page, panel 1, and you describe it and put the dialogue in, panel 2, panel 3, or this is a splash page, which means it's a single image that fills the screen, fills the page. And the thing that also helped us with animation is because in live action, you're very penned in by whatever your budget is, right? Like, we can't afford this VFX shot. We'll go over budget. We can't do this cool thing we want to do, but we'll have to figure out another way around it, or write in some other story thing, or we'll have to film a bottle episode, which means we have to use only the sets we have. We can't go anywhere, out, beyond our normal environment or our sound stages. Those are what bottle episodes are. And, but when you're writing comics or animation, you're not quite as limited in what you can show and what you can do. And that was what was exciting about Star Trek, right? Because up to now, the aliens have been represented by what we could basically stick onto a person's face with, spirit gum, it was sort of like, here are the appliances, but everybody is a bipedal human for the most part, except for the Horta and like 1 or 2 others, like a Medusan or whatever. And in animation, you could actually get out of that and create aliens that don't look human, that look different and act different and have different rules. And I mean, it takes a little bit to wrap your brain around being able to do that. It took me a little bit anyway. And when we were writing comics, that helped us get to that point faster, because we had that experience in comics where we were writing our issues a little like writing television when we started, and our editors came back and said, hey, you can do more. And we're like, well, what do you mean? Well, like, if you wanted to blow up a helicopter, you could blow up a helicopter on the page, right? That can be drawn. Probably don't want to do it every issue because your artist probably would hate you, but you can do things at a scope and a scale that would cost millions of dollars to do in a TV show or a movie, but on a comics page, it's the same price. It's the art.
So cool. I never thought about it that way, but that it just really opens up the whole world of infinite possibilities that you can't necessarily do. That is so cool.
Yeah. I mean, effects budgets are better, and you can certainly do things like, I would have never imagined that I would see Starro in a movie. Starro is in the Suicide Squad movie, and Starro is is the original villain from the Justice League, Justice League of America. And you're like, wait, they're fighting Starro? Like Starro? And it actually looking pretty decent, in terms of like the effect or whatever. But, I mean, there are all kinds of things that you can do in comics and in animation that are just really, really hard to pull off in live action, and almost to the point of impossible. And that's exciting when you can use the different tools at your disposal to tell story in different ways, which you don't always get to do.
What's really cool is the way that you were describing working with stuff that wasn't like you can't see it, but then that other people will make it come to life later. It kind of makes me think of like you guys are sitting down and playing D&D, and then later someone's animating it. You can imagine the whole worlds and stuff in your head and go along with that story, and then you make it later.
It's genuinely like the thing it's not the only thing I love about my job. I mean, I love writing. I love the process of it. I love collaborating with other people and working with other creatives. I mean, all of it is fun and is very rewarding and fulfilling. But to hear the words you wrote spoken, to see things, that exist that didn't exist before, that you thought up and then put on a page, and all of that to sort of, I said things to be fully realized. It is a shot of adrenaline. Like I still, every time I get excited, I was excited every time I got a page of comic art. I'm excited every time I would see even a sketch of what they thought a character might look like for our show. And we didn't see anything until really late, like maybe the last month or so. We were on the show, they had started to bring in the storyboard artists and the character designers and some of those folks. And so we did get to see a little bit, but it was all still very early sketch. But all of that stuff was super exciting. And like I say, anytime I was go onto a soundstage or onto a set and watch episode being shot, and then seeing it all come together and being able to say, I made that. I wrote that. I did that.
That is so cool. That is so wholesome too. Oh my gosh.
But you guys are doing that. You guys get to do that anytime you're making your podcast, right? You sit, you have the conversation, you talk about what you love, and then it exists and people can watch it and tell you that they love it and that you are awesome, which you are. So yay for all of us content creators.
You are awesome.
I love that you
Very
use
cool
the term.
too. Just kidding.
That was a good one. That was a good aggressive one.
It's an admission.
Because content creation, I wanted to ask you, and I know this podcast has run a little bit longer than our normal ones, but it's been, I've enjoyed it. The idea of content creation has changed a lot. Writing has changed a lot. And you've experienced writing for a while now to where it started to transition to a lot of different things. Like you mentioned, like a lot of the new DC movies and stuff, that animation, not only animation in terms of like what Prodigy is, but in terms of what you're able to do with whatever the current version of CGI is, if it's even still called CGI, how that's developed so much. How much has, that like changed for you as a writer, going from, how it was in the 90s where, you had to focus so much on the actor's ability for emotion and not as much in terms of what you could do with the effect, to now, how has your writing changed to doing, not just animation, but any type of live stuff that you've done, but now you have the ability to say, hey, we don't necessarily have to go out and video an actual helicopter going boom, but we can use special effects to do it for, a quarter of the price. How much has that changed writing as an industry?
Oh man. I mean, a lot, right? Thankfully I'm not so old that I can speak to what it was to be writing scripts in the 90s. I wish I could. I wish my career could have started that long ago, but you were
writing fan fiction, so you were kind of doing it. You just weren't getting paid yet.
Yeah. I mean, the difference was, but even like for a time after my sister and I moved to California, which has been almost 20 years ago, one of the things you have to do to get into this business is create and write sample scripts, right? And usually you start out writing your version of episodes that exist, of shows that exist. They're called specs because you're writing it on speculation. And so it's a little like writing fan fiction, right? You're writing your version of something, but you're also trying to mimic what the show is to show that you understand what that show is and that you can write it. And then you write your own like pilot, right? For a TV show or your own feature, your own movie. And in doing those things, there is a set kind of expectation of like how long it is. And, if it's for commercial television, it has this many acts, there are this many commercial breaks, that sort of thing. And over time now, things have shifted so much, just even in the last 5 to 10 years where, we don't necessarily have to write a show with act breaks anymore, at least not delineated on the page. We'll still write scenes and we write whole episodes, but I don't have to say, well, and this is the end of act 1. Because this is the boom out where we go to a commercial for soap and then they come back and we're back in act 2, so that sort of thing is different because we're writing it for streaming out with outfits, premium cable, etc. Scripts are shorter, in part because we do a lot more with action. And so you don't have as many pages to write because action doesn't take up as much room on the page, but it definitely takes up more room when you shoot it. And so, the shorthand is Atlanta Burns, and it's a little apocryphal, but essentially it was the idea that, in Gone with the Wind, 2 words defined this $1 million scene essentially of, and then Atlanta Burns. And then it's like, you go into this incredibly expensive spectacle that at the time was just insane. And you would say, yeah, you could put 2 words on the page and it costs you $1 million. Now it's a little bit like that, but the economy has come to making it less than, maybe still $1 million. We can afford that $1 million, whatever, and still get the same level or better spectacle. I I would say that, yeah, being able to do things in CGI has made things better and worse. Like the things that you can do that are subtle that people don't really think about, like I can have this house on fire without actually setting it on fire, right? Like I can paint flames on the house, maybe have some real fire in the foreground so that you see that there is fire and it's real and it's tangible, but then, in the smoke and everything, but I don't have to actually literally set a house on fire to do that. And that's huge. Like that saves you so much time. Oh, we didn't get that scene. We got to rebuild the house. You're not going to do that, like, used to be, you got one shot. Oh,
that would be so terrible.
Oh, sorry, we didn't have the camera on.
At the same time, there's definitely an appreciation for directors and producers and stuff who focus on using like tangible props. Like one thing that we've always loved, like, Star Trek, even with the remasters, that was 6, 7, 8 foot large props that they made. They filmed around and then green screened into special effects. And I love now, like, I don't mind, and this isn't necessarily a complaint to say Picard, but like the scene where all the ships warp in and you laugh how it's copy paste by all the CGI masters. At the same time, there's definitely an appreciation for both. What do you prefer? Do you love going full CGI, or do you want those nice 6-foot models that cost tens of thousands of dollars to make, and you want that in your show?
Well, yeah. And sometimes the subtle effects are the ones that you get the most benefit out of, the most bang for your buck, because and I always bring up the concept of the feather in Forrest Gump, right? You guys have seen Forrest Gump, yeah?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. At the very beginning and the very end of the movie, there's a feather that floats down, and Forrest, Tom Hanks picks it up, and the feather that you see that's floating down out of the sky, that's CGI, right? It's not a real feather. They created it on a computer, and it's there. It's like being chased by a Tyrannosaurus Rex that's not there. All of those things, like those kinds of effects, like the Tyrannosaurus Rex is a big version of that, but like the feather is a very small version. You could fix something in post that you could never fix before. Like we had, you can shoot a scene and, oh my gosh, the radio antennas, in something that was in the 60s, if you're trying to make it look like the 1920s or the 1800s, and you had a huge satellite dish in the picture, kind of screwed, right? Like it's not going anywhere. You can't do anything with it. Now we can erase it. Now we can paint it out. So we don't have to worry so much about what we're shooting or having to shoot around something. It doesn't mean it's cheap, but it does save you a lot of energy and effort having to like find the perfect location, because you can build out a lot of the location with CGI, and that makes it easier, make it better to the time period.
Pick one thing you've written, not Star Trek, one script, whether it's a comic, 100, your favorite thing you've ever written that has made it into publication, whether on TV, comic, whatever. One favorite.
Oh boy, that's a tough one.
Like if you want people to see, this is Shawna's best work, not counting Star Trek, which is obviously your best work. What is it?
Yeah, outside of Prodigy, I would say we wrote an issue of Green Arrow that was not something we expected to get to write, which was that Tom King was writing Heroes in Crisis, which was a series where it was a lot about PTSD and superheroes. And what happens in that story is that Roy Harper dies. And Roy Harper was the sidekick to Green Arrow for a really long time. And that became an issue for us, because we were like, well, we can't just ignore Roy's death. We actually need to acknowledge it in some way. It's a huge character in the history of the DC universe. We should pay homage to that in some way, Arsenal, Red Arrow, whatever you want to call him, like that character is very important. And so we wrote a funeral issue. I mean, we basically told them we were going to write the funeral issue. We said, this is too big, and we're going to basically stop the story that we're telling. And in the middle of the story, we're going to insert this issue, and it'll still play to the story, the larger story, but it tells a really great sort of, it's Ollie having to deal with his grief to some degree, and being in denial about how important Roy was to him in his life, and how he maybe didn't appreciate him as much as he should have, while he was around. And that was just a really important thing. And it's the thing that people come up and talk to us about the most, I think, when we are at conventions. And, they tell us that it was that we, they really enjoyed it. And they liked that we cared about Roy as a character and wanted to treat him well, treat him right, give him a good send off in that way. And so, I looked at that as something I'm pretty proud of. So
now I've got to pick up that issue. I've admittedly, we actually talked about this. What was it, Bo? Like 2 or 3 episodes ago, that neither you nor I have really ever had the chance to really get into comics, and they're coming back into a thing now. And not just because that I'm trying to write my own, just because I'm a huge nerd and I want to be nerdier than I already am. But like comics are picking back up, everything tangible. Like you thought a lot of people thought that COVID would just like everything's going digital now. It's all gone, and it's actually the exact opposite. More people want Pokemon cards, they want comics, they want tangible things in their hand. And I'm gonna have to go find that issue. Honestly, I've been more of a Marvel person most of my life anyway, and that's mostly because the MCU has been freaking fantastic. Me and Bo recorded yesterday, which will actually come out after this episode, but we recorded the Shang-Chi review where we basically spent 45 minutes going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, and this was amazing. Just obsessed over it. But
that's awesome.
At the same time, like, we've had people come on the show like, yeah, I've got a filing cabinet of 5,000 comics. And honestly, I want to be that guy. I want to be that nerd that is so entrenched in this awesomeness. I've got a filing cabinet of 5,000 comics.
Yeah.
That's exactly why I don't collect them.
My very quick story is I worked as an assistant for a writer for a few years, and he had a huge comic book collection. And of course, he was getting like almost every title. I swear to God, it was like he was getting us like 50 to 70 books a month, or sometimes twice a month if they were twice monthlies. And I had to bag and board them all. And so I literally thought of it as my Yoda training, my Mr. Miyagi training of wax on, wax off. It was bag and board, but along the way I was reading issues as I was bagging and boarding them. And I picked up a lot, like I read a lot of Gotham City Sirens when I was bagging and boarding during that era. And I read a lot of Nightwing, and I read a lot of Batman, and the Court of Owls and things like that. So, I mean, I got a really good education in comics, having never really been a huge comics reader. I was a sci-fi book reader as a kid. I was really the one who was just like my nose in a book. And my sister read a lot of comics. And so comics was something that was a really big dream for her. And she and I write together. We're a writing team most of the time. We write our own things occasionally, but she and I worked on Prodigy together, and we wrote the comics together. I'll send you a book. You don't have to pick it up. I'll just send it to you.
I'll gladly pay for it. I mean, it's fine. Thank you.
I'm going to sign it and everything.
Wow.
You too, Bobae. Not my signature will probably devalue it for you, but I'll sign it anyway.
Definitely not. The writer of the comic signed it. Yeah, I'm actually gonna put it in a frame straight to eBay. Yeah. So
although the cover is amazing, the cover is so good on that particular issue. So
thank you.
Totally worth it.
It's extremely, extremely kind of you. People need to stop doing nice things to me because I really don't know how to handle that. I do have a question though, because content creation, we mentioned this earlier, has changed so much. But you are a writer. You've literally created characters. You've written characters. You've created story. For the new wave of content creators, which really is people like me and Bobae. Not that we're these huge, but the type of content creation that we're doing is where CC is kind of heading in a direction. Not that writers are going out of the way, but none of that. Just that this is becoming more of a spotlight. Esports, being entertaining in front of a camera as an individual versus becoming a trained actor. What advice would you say that you've learned in terms of character creation and personalities that you have found that the world really sees as entertaining, that you would give advice to content creators to try to pick up? Like what traits have worked in TV and comics that people who are trying to do like I'm doing, like on Twitch and YouTube, that makes people want to have that content?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the thing that is common, whether you're writing fiction or nonfiction scripts, right? I mean, you still have to kind of write a script, or at least some idea of what you're going to say on your podcast. Or if you're doing a live stream, you have, talking points, things that you want to talk about, whether it's fully written out or not. I mean, you're still writing. All of that is writing. But I think the biggest thing is authenticity, right? That you're coming from a place that is genuine and it's you. They say to write what you know, but it's a little limiting because what I know, like my actual life experience, is pretty small. but I can imagine a lot and I can read a lot and take in a lot. I can't live in the Star Trek universe, literally, but I have seen what a transporter does, and I can write to that, and I can imagine it, right? Like I can imagine what it's like to be molecularly taken apart and then put back together again in another place. Like that's...
Would you ever let that happen though? Or would you go full like...
Oh yeah, I would 100% let that happen.
You would
I mean, it might turn into Galaxy Quest where you get turned inside out and explode, but and Galaxy Quest, by the way, is the best Star Trek movie that's ever been made. It's kind of true.
So is The Orville the best Star Trek series that's ever been made?
The Orville is definitely an excellent Star Trek series that is not Star Trek. It's like also Master and Commander. My sister actually got retweeted by Russell Crowe on this because she was tweeting about Master and Commander being an excellent Star Trek movie, because it kind of is. Like the relationship between... It
was a holodeck program. Yeah.
Captain and his, doctor is very Kirk Spock to some degree. And so, yeah. But to that degree, right? Whether you are talking about something that's happening in the world, like a talk show kind of thing, or whether you are doing fictional, storytelling, whatever it is, being you, coming from your place of experience, but also being able to apply that experience is really valuable. And that's why we value people coming from different backgrounds and having different life experiences coming together and sharing that experience with their audience. You and Bobae are probably very different people with very different life experiences. I mean, I would hazard that as a guess.
I think we had identical upbringings, actually. I think they were actually...
I mean, there's a lot of commonality, right? I said that before. We were talking about it. It's like we're all the same, but we're all very unique and different. Yeah. And in that way, the things that make us the same, those are the things everybody will automatically love you for, right? Like it's like Seinfeld was really good at that observational humor, and the observational humor works because we all observe it and we all go, yeah, that is really annoying, or that's really funny, or that's something I have, I know what that is. I know what that feels like. But then also to be able to bring something else to it to say, well, here's something that you might not experience, but I can tell you about it because I experience it from my point of view. That's authenticity, right? Like those are the things that you can't get if you're pretending or putting on to be something that you're not. Always the real version of you is, and that was the thing. It was like, if I could go back in time and give my teenage self advice, because I've actually thought about this. Like if I could go back in time and give myself advice as a kid, what would it be? And it would be, don't be afraid of being yourself. Don't be afraid to express who you are and what you like, and really love what you love, and not worry about what other people say about it, whether they like it or not. It doesn't matter. It's for you, and you're okay to like it. And I think I was scared as a teenager of being seen as weird and, a freak for liking Doctor Who and Star Trek and Quantum Leap and everything else that I watched, everything else that I consumed, Red Dwarf, all of it, and that probably kept me from probably pursuing my dreams for a good 10 years until I finally decided that I really did want to try to do that for a living, the thing that I had always been doing kind of off, in a notebook and scribbling things in the afternoons. So that's all.
Great advice. And I can tell how much Star Trek has influenced your life by that answer. That was like the most Star Trek has inspired me to be me, and unashamedly me. Yeah, it's one of the things I love about Star Trek is no matter the series, there is a character there that's going to inspire you to be yourself and accept yourself for who you are. Even in the original series, which for that time was probably not the paradigm everybody was going with, especially for the space western that Gene had come up with. But even now, like every series, there is a character I connect with in every Star Trek.
Yeah. I mean, we all want to be seen to some degree, and we want to see ourselves represented. I mean, representation matters. It's important. And you don't have to identify with every single character. It's okay if you don't, but you should acknowledge that somebody will identify with that character, because I guarantee you that the writer did in some way. Even if I don't have that same lived experience as a writer, I am still going to put something of myself into that character, because that's what you do. You inform them with what you know.
Well, I have had an absolute blast, and I am very, very thankful that you came on our little show, because we're just two nerds who like nerdy things.
You guys are a lot of fun, and I really do enjoy what you do. And, I respect the amount of work and effort that goes into all of what you guys do.
We only have to work like 30 minutes a day. We content create. It's so easy.
Staggering the amount of work you have to do. It's a lot. But thank you for having me, because, I am a chatterbox and I will talk about this stuff for hours. Unfortunately for you.
We can. Next time we'll just do a live stream. Like, look, we're interviewing writers.
You'll get me back? You'll let me come back? That'd be awesome.
Only if you bring your sister and y'all tell us amazing stories about Hollywood.
Done.
Yeah.
She has great stories. She worked for Dustin Hoffman as her first job.
There's been so many name drops here.
I know. I'll go back and pick them up later. I apologize.
Yeah. If y'all ever want to be humbled, just invite a Hollywood writer to your podcast immediately. Like, you know nothing, Jon Snow.
Look, one of the greatest days of my life was, getting to meet Weird Al Yankovic in the lobby at Nickelodeon while I was working on Prodigy. And it was a total accident. Awesome. And I was like, oh my God. I was with a couple of other writers and we were like, Weird Al Yankovic is here. What's he doing here? He must be meeting on something. Oh, I don't know, but I've never met. And then a producer was with him, a producer I knew because we were working on a project with her, and she came over and said hi. And I was like, you're working with Weird Al? I had no idea you were working with Weird Al. And she's like, yeah, you want to meet him? And I was like, it was like, okay, yeah, sure. I'll just meet one of my childhood heroes. No big deal. And of course, he's the nicest human being, right? Just very gracious. And
this was so crazy to me. Like, now I've obviously got to, know you for, I wouldn't say a while now, but this is Bo's first time to really get talking. The starstruck is very evident with Bo. And I promise everybody that me meeting Miss Shawna is the exact same way. But it's hilarious for me and Bo to sit here and be like, oh my God, this is such high profile level person. And then you're like, oh, I fangirl about everybody. Like,
oh God, I'm the worst. Yeah. I will, Gates McFadden, I will probably faint. And
You've not met Gates McFadden yet?
I've met almost none of the Star Trek actors. Wow. That was the other bummer. It's like all of the voice recording and everything happened after we were done writing. So I'm, experiencing those performances the way everyone else is. And I'm actually kind of glad about it. Like, there's a part of me that is super glad that I get to, be surprised by everything when it comes out, because it has been a while. It's been like a year and a half, almost 2 years since we wrote some of this stuff. And so,
dang COVID.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we finished on the show February 28th last year. That was the date we finished. And, a week and a half later, LA shut down, locked down. So, we had just finished on Prodigy when that all went sideways. And then but the animation is big because the animators could keep working. They could can't go shoot anything on a set, but the animators can still draw.
Well, I'm glad we got Prodigy coming out. I know it's been a long episode. If y'all haven't, check out everything that Miss Shawna has worked on. Prodigy, Green Arrow, and even pull up the 100. Pull up some reruns, because of course you've got way more than that, but my limited brain is struggling to think of everything else after an hour and a half of being mind blown. So
you guys are very nice, and thank you for giving me the time.
It's been great. If y'all have enjoyed it, please drop your likes and comments down below. Also, we want 2 counters. We want a snort counter from Bobae and a name drop counter from Miss Shawna. We're going to see who was higher down in the comment section below. We appreciate y'all. Live long and prosper. Oh, one last thing. I forgot to ask. I told you I would ask you this. What do you think about the story writing in Star Trek Fleet Command?
I think that it's there.
It's there, everybody.
It
And
exists.
It does exist. And we will catch you on the next Observations Lounge podcast. We love y'all. Live long and prosper. Stay safe with the Space Cowboys. Deuces, that's me. That's Miss Shawna. That's Bo. Bye. Outro now.